At Con Edison, we want everyone to know what to do if they smell gas. Here are some ways to detect a natural gas leak at home or in a public place. Be suspicious of a rotten egg smell or a whistling or hissing sound. If you do smell gas, leave the area immediately. Never light a match, and don't use your cell phone or turn on the lights. When you're safe, call 911 or 1-800-75-CON-ED. Visit coned.com/gas safety tips for more information. Con Edison. Everything matters.
Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Kimya Gandhi with us on Audio Gyan. Kimya is a type designer from Mumbai with passionate interest in Indic type design. She interned at Linotype Germany in their font design department in 2010. Over the next several years, she worked as a freelance designer for numerous type foundries, catering to their multi-script requirements. Since 2015, she has been a partner at Mota Italic, focusing on Indic and Latin designs for retail and custom corporate projects. And today we are here to discuss about Indian type design, its education and its importance, and how Kimya in her small and big ways trying to bring awareness about Indic type design. So thank you, Kimya, for giving us your time, and it's a real pleasure to have you on Audio Gyan.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. So how has new technology or new software along with OpenType features changing the face of Indian type faces, and what has now become possible, what was not possible? If you can just set some context by that, and then we can see how we can...
Yeah. So I think what happened initially was, there was different font software that you could create different fonts with. So, like Illustrator, to give an example, where you draw things. So where different font softwares where you could create fonts were different initially. And what would happen is with Indic scripts, what happens is we have Zodakshara and we have a lot of matras that is called mark positioning or like substitution features, so as to say, which basically enable the rendering of the script properly. So when I type like ka halanta ya, it needs to substitute the ka halanta by a half form of the ka.
Correct.
So that is something that is coded in the font. That's the information that you need to program, because it's not going to just have a mind of its own and just, substitute that. But that substitution is a feature that one needs to write while designing this font as well. So it's not just, your work doesn't stop at just designing the half form of the ka, but once your design is done, it's also important that you do this programming that says that substitute ka halanta by the half form of the ka.
Okay, so is it like a code snippet?
Yeah, it's a code, yeah. Okay. So there's different ways in which this can be done. So which was a little bit more tedious, if I may say so, initially, like a decade back, because you had to do this code in another software, you had to design in another software and kind of try to merge these together. And also the file sizes that were supporting characters sets, like, for Devanagari, you probably need like 600 letter forms or something, 600 glyphs. And so initially that wouldn't be possible, or so you had to create like multiple files for the same font, etc. So it was a little bit more tedious. But what has happened now with help of OpenType technology is that you can have this information embedded in the font file in a particular font software, and then you export your font, and then all these features kind of work in any kind of publishing software, etc. So I think that's kind of a major shift that has enabled designing more seamlessly than it used to be before, and it's a little bit easier for designers to even tackle this coding now. So there's some software like the one I use is Glyphs app. The software is still like what happens in this software is you design, and there is a coding features window in the software itself. So you basically update all the features, and most of the features get auto-generated as well. But you also have the liberty to kind of edit them and write your own code if that's what you want to do. But what happens is you hit export and all this information gets compiled and exported, and you have a completely usable font ready, which is quite interesting especially for people who are trying to design a font for the first time, who maybe don't want to get into the programming aspect of it immediately. So you can still have a readily working font available with the use of this software, which wasn't possible.
But when you code or as opposed to use this particular application, the versatility of the font changes, or as in the way it can be rendered in different places, different contexts. Does it get affected?
The code is it's only the language engine part of it. It's only so that the script can work the way it does. So it's basically, if you have a U matra, so the positioning feature, what it does is it makes sure that the ka, when the U matra you type after the ka, it will position itself centered on the Madhya Danda, for example. So that is a feature that you can work with in these software. So it's only the technical working aspect of it, mostly.
Okay.
Well, there are some kind of design features, like if you have used like swashes or something, so you can design those as well in this application and then export them. And just by naming them a certain way, your features get generated and you can have a working font file.
Wow.
So that's quite interesting, and to me it's especially in colleges or something, when you have maybe just a module and you have students trying to figure out type design for the first time, it's good to have something that works, because then you can test it out and to understand the aesthetic part of it. Also, this technical side helps a lot, because if you don't have something that can work the way you want it to work, then it's kind of a slight limitation. If it doesn't render properly, then it's not nice. So
correct. And I don't know whether this will come as a very ignorant question, but when you're actually coding these things, so it's a layman question, that do you really have to then make combinations of every character? As in, if K followed by U, then this is how it should render. If K followed by E, this is how it should be rendered, and so on and so forth for these 600 odd combinations.
Yes and no. For example, like you said, the U is, again, like I said, this is kind of difficult to explain over, I think, just audio. If you had visuals, it's probably easier, because I can just show what happens. But to explain in a simple way, I think what happens is U is a positioning feature. It needs to position itself.
Correct.
Right. So those happen with something called as anchors. So you basically put an anchor on, like the name suggests, an anchor. It basically anchors to a certain point. So those you have to put on each and every of the consonants or the conjuncts where you think these these positional matras will follow. And
so this is where, so is possible, or all the things have to be thought through?
Yeah, it has to be thought through,
okay.
yes. Yeah. So you have to have an anchor on each of the characters that you think will need a U matra, for example.
No, you think, as in, I want to understand, you think it will come, or there's a inventory that this has to be covered?
Oh, that's something that a designer will decide.
Okay.
But that's it's sort of basic, no? That on a half form, for example, you won't have a U matra, but it will be on a full form.
Okay. Correct.
It's like that.
Yeah.
But for example, conjuncts is something, Zodakshar is something that is more, can get a little bit tricky, because it is, you have your linear conjuncts, which is the half consonant followed by the full consonant, which is linear, but you also have vertically stacked conjuncts in Devanagari, for example. So that is a decision that you have, as a designer, I will take how many of these conjuncts will I design and what language am I supporting. So suppose, for example, if I'm supporting not including Sanskrit, for example, then in advanced Sanskrit you could need thousands of other conjuncts or something, hundreds more. But that depends on the context of the design. So if I'm designing sorry, if I'm designing for Hindi, Marathi, Nepali, these languages, then you probably need a smaller character set, and then the conjuncts that you need are less, then that affects again the code. So, if I have these many conjuncts, then that is the amount of code that is. So
I think I should do some workshop because I'm able to get some bits of it, but on the face of it, it looks very, very complex.
actually, it's not that complicated once you see what is happening. I think just to hear about it is maybe more complicated. Yes, it's a little tedious than maybe, making, I don't know what I can compare it to, but the drawing part of it is one, but I think a lot of people sometimes it's not so clear that this also happens with the font. Usually it's not, because fonts are something that usually people just think like appear on their computers. And so, especially with Indian language, Indian script typefaces, what happens, this back end that also goes on is something that I think is not very, even in the design field, I think is not so commonly known, if I may say so. So, yeah, but it's a very important aspect of it that just makes things work. So,
Correct. Interesting. We'll plug one last thing in our conversation, that when is your next workshop and how can people come. But yeah, moving on to the next question. You engage yourself in educating about type design also. So what have your observations been like? This has two aspects to it. One is how aware or sensitive these institutions are who call you or who invite you to give some workshops or presentations or whatever it is, and how aware, if I can say, your students are also about Indic type design specifically.
Okay. So to answer the first part of your question, what happened was when I was studying myself, I did not know that I'm going to be pursuing type design as a profession when I was in my bachelor course, because I didn't even know that this existed. So, whatever, that many years back, that was not really a field of choice. I knew graphic design or communication design as a field that I could do something, that is where I was aiming at loosely. So, but when I did my bachelor's course, I did get into a little bit of lettering and in general the world of letter forms, and I got more and more interested, and then I kind of sought it out myself, that there is a entire field dedicated to doing this. So then that is something that I kept like trying to find out more about and got more and more interested. And then even in my master's course, all my projects were type design. But there was still, I think, it wasn't like an academic course, it was a part of visual communication that I could take up myself. So that was something that even resources-wise, there was something that was missing, I thought. So I even went and did an internship to try and find out. But even the internship was something that was that helped me a lot to understand the overall field and, to understand, to meet a lot of new people and different people, and which is great. But I think, again, the resources was something that I was thinking that, where can I get more and more information and how can I educate myself in this field as much as possible. Then the next year I went and did a summer course at the University of Reading in UK, and they have a massive library of archives and just, book covers or original drawings of typefaces. And I was quite blown away because I was like, why is all of this sitting in UK and why don't we have anything collected here? So that is somewhere where I personally just wanted to try and collect as much information. And once I started doing that, it was not like I was the only one doing it. I just met like-minded people who are already trying to do their bit in, getting type design resources together and just having these conversations. So that I think that's just the way I navigated through to these. So I think my interest in trying to spread more awareness or, just have more people be interested in the field is just because I think, we have so many scripts and languages in such a diverse country, but I think I find it quite ironic that we don't have a course on, like, we don't have an MA in type design in India running, which should just happen. And so,
it's more like professional, maybe IDC or
but IDC has a course like which is visual communication, and if you're interested
there's no purely type design.
No. I mean, there's courses that happen. There's an advanced typography module, which like elective that you can you can opt for, but there's not like a dedicated course. There's smaller workshops. So to answer the second part of your question, like when a lot of private institutes or whichever institutes do want to involve type design, it's usually as an elective, or a module. It's not a part of their course. So as graphic design students, all of the students don't necessarily. Of course, this differs with different colleges. Every college has a different syllabus and they deal with it differently. But usually, type design is only a module, which I thought is also kind of problematic because the process is long and you can't really. It's difficult to squeeze everything in 2 weeks, for example. You cannot possibly design a whole Indic typeface in 2 weeks. So you can only brush through like the surface and say, okay, this is how things work, and you can give an overview in 2 weeks. But I think it would be really interesting if there would be a full-fledged,
3-year dedicated course.
Yeah,
maybe.
why not?
Yeah.
So, because we have all the necessary material somewhere. I think, even though there's probably not a dedicated library, maybe that has only letter form related books or something like that. But there's so much around. The visual landscape is so rich that all you have to do is just walk around and you'll find so many good and bad examples, and you could just conduct a class on the streets of different cities, because there is so much visual information around in our surroundings. So I think all the building blocks are there. There are so many people who are already teaching, taking workshops. So I think it's
just a matter of time that we fragmented hai, maybe we can see. In fact, I was listening to one interesting podcast. The podcast name I remember, Sin Talk, but I don't remember the guest. And one interesting insight which he shared was that this South Indian languages are very curvy, right? They have like very rounded edges and lot of more curves in the script itself. And he shared one brilliant insight that I think 3rd century paper was invented, and by the time it moved to India, it was probably 7th century that it started, was in the mainstream and people had started using. But before that, even people used to write. So where do they write? So they used to write on leaves. And because of the veins of the leaves, you can't write horizontal, so you have to just play along with the veins, and that's how it was evolved. So like brilliant history, brilliant insights, like rooted in our tradition itself, right? So maybe your efforts and let's see. So you have been promoting teaching also. So you covered this in the earlier question, but the second part to this question was how sensitive are students for this, and what are the ways where how these students have been reacting to that? Like, are they getting interested, or they just think it's another elective, or
since
what
it's
are your
an
observations
elective,
around?
the students choose to be in this. So I would assume that they are interested in, elective is something that it's not a part of your regular course syllabus, so you choose to be in this particular elective. So the students who do opt for it, I would assume, are interested in learning about this. That's why they chose that particular elective. But no, I think even overall, when I do basic typography classes, I tend to include Indic scripts in it. As if it's a 1-month course, for example, then 1 week at least is dedicated to doing even typography in Indian scripts. Because I think it's important that as designers, as young designers, that you at least are aware of what the Indian design landscape is. It's not, I think it's not nice if, you as a design student say, oh yeah, all the South Indian scripts, like they're all the same or something. I think it's not sensitive. You don't say that as a designer, because they're not. They're all diverse. They all have their own, identity and beautiful forms. And I think it would be really nice if you at least knew what different scripts in India looked like, and if you could identify them and say, oh, this is this. It's not like you need to learn all of them, or I'm not even saying that you have to design in all of the scripts. Though it would be nice if people would, which they are, of course. But I think as students, to me it's important that you are at least aware of this. And then if you get interested and if you decide to do something in the field, then that's
But what advantage
welcome.
do you see? Say, suppose we'll just get into some utopian world that almost all the people know different scripts, how they are designed. And today, if there are, say, out of 100 people in the country, there are only one type designer. Suppose that changes to 10 or 20. Right? How will the landscape change in terms of communication within the city? What all areas will get affected or will be impacted?
I think currently what is happening is that there are a lot of foundries who are designing multi-script typefaces also, where they try to design for all of the Indian language, like scripts that you need typefaces for. But there's still, I think, if you see the quantity of how many typefaces there are, if you compare it to the Latin or world of typefaces, it's massive, the difference. And not to compare it to anything, but I think there is scope generally for a lot more typefaces to exist. So I think that's just like, that would in a way help in, for example, if you think of like there's text typefaces and there are display typefaces. Display is basically what you would use for larger point sizes. So those are usually more decorative, or they're bolder or those kind of things. But those display typefaces are also, there's not as many as you would like. For example, if you want to make hoardings, posters, whatever, for whatever reason. So more typefaces means that there's variety to choose from. So that's always a good thing to have, if I have to design something and I need a heavy Devanagari typeface, and if there's only two, then I have to choose one of those two, irrespective of if it satisfies the context of my design or not. So if it's a corporate, I don't know, something, and I still need a bold for that, as compared to maybe a extra bold typeface for a Marathi like music concert or something, So that is something different. The context is different. So you would want a typeface that satisfied that function. But if I don't have those options, then I just pick whatever is available. So I think providing more options for different kinds of uses would just enrich how designers can use them as well. I think a few years back the problem was that there weren't enough typefaces, to Unicode ones, of course, which are more standardized, which can be used across different media successfully. So if those weren't there, for example, like multi-script typefaces, if you did not have one typeface that kind of coherently supported different scripts of in the country, if you didn't just have that, then your visual communication is
language changes.
It changes. So you probably end up using different fonts for different scripts, and then it doesn't look like maybe one brand or something. So by creating those, you give an opportunity for designers to use them in new and interesting ways as well. So
what I was actually pointing to is that I think last year I interviewed Shiva Nila Perumal, and he said there was no Odia font only existing, right? And the moment it was introduced, suddenly the textbooks, the school material started looking much more friendlier. A lot more things which were never documented started getting documented. So I was pointing to these kind of instances where if more people are into type design, if more people are creating different fonts, supporting multi-script, so like the way schools were impacted, where do you think any other domains which will be like drastically improved?
Well, I think in the current situation, there's so much information around us, like with like new media, for example. You have phones and smartphones and if you see the amount of internet users in our country, it's massive. The amount of people who have started using smartphones and the way they are consuming information is changing drastically. So everybody has phones and everybody has some kind of social networking app on their phone. So if you consider the reach of these, and if you think that that's just going to grow, if you want to impact different kinds of audiences with that, then you need scripts to, if you didn't have a typeface in Odia, for example, then how can you have it on your phone? Then that means you can't type in your own script on your phone as well. So, so I think new media is something that's going to just impact the most, because that's where people are consuming most of their information currently. So, even like news, a lot of people just have apps for news now. There's not as many people reading a newspaper, maybe. I don't have actual statistics, so I'm not going to quote that. But, just overall consumption of information has shifted onto your phone or, iPad or whatever, or like a tablet or something. So that's where so that if you're reading everything on these devices, then yes, you need typefaces that support that information too. So I think that's where I also see a lot of impact happening, not just in bigger cities, but when it reaches all parts of India. Also, I think what we're talking about is, the main official languages or scripts, that support. There's so many other scripts that exist in India that also have their own, languages that also have their own scripts, which also is an area where is just open for people to just, create new typefaces for them as well. For example, there was a project to create typefaces for rare scripts from India, which I was working on. And while I was trying to research that, there were so few resources. There were like 5-6 images of that script and no online information. Even their Wikipedia page had like drawings or something. But then like a few years back, I designed a typeface for that script. And then I went and looked at the Wikipedia page, and now they're using one of the typeface that I designed. So I'm not sure how good or bad of a typeface it is, but I think the point is that just because that's probably the only one available, which is why it's just getting used. So I think if there are more people who contribute to this pool, then I think it just makes it more diverse. And
correct, yeah. In fact, I remember one podcast which I was listening to, Massimo Vignelli, and he said he can just live with 2 fonts, right? Baskerville and I think Future or something. And he said like rest of the fonts are not required. And if he was alive today, maybe we would have invited him to India and say that please, we need more fonts, right? Because in Latin and other scripts, it's possible to manage with few fonts and then better typography.
I don't know. I think that is probably his personal outlook. It's a...
No, but he holds a position to because as an influencer, he has certain...
Sure, but that doesn't probably make it a norm, You probably find another designer who says quite the contrary.
Yeah.
So there's space for everyone.
Absolutely. So this one question which is slightly thoda light-hearted because I'll tell you the background where I came with this for also. So we all know the famous Oscar blunder which happened, right? So I want to understand, again, as a layman, was it because of bad typography, or was it because of... So are there any other instances where... See, Oscars is fine, right? But when it comes to medical, when it comes to other domains where there's life and death situation, especially in India, the signages and stuff like that. So do they need better typography, or do they need better type design? And the reason why I'm asking you this is also because when I interviewed Mahindra Patel, he said, you give me comics and then I'll set it so nicely that it will still look nice. So there's no ugly font as such. It's just how good your typography is. So that's where I'm coming from. And if you have any thoughts, ideas around it.
Yeah, well, so I think with the question of if it needs better typefaces or typography, I think they go hand in hand. I think what Mahendra Bhai is saying is that, if you give a maybe not so good typeface to a good designer, they can maybe make it work
Worse.
better. But if you give a good typeface to a bad designer, then they would probably still not use it to its optimum. You know what I mean? So it's I think it needs to work together. I think it's, as a graphic designer who is using a typeface, it's important that he has information about a good typeface as well as how to use it. I think they both, even as a typeface designer, if I create a typeface and when I'm putting it up on my website or, showing you how I think you can use this typeface, if I don't make examples that are good enough, then how will I convince you that you can use this typeface in these particular ways? So I think it's not just important to have only good typefaces. You need both to work hand in hand. It's a fine balance that you need.
But isn't it more important for a better font face when it comes to Indic typeface? Because the earlier conversation, right? The coup positioning of...
I think that I think is not... So there's aesthetic and there is the production part of it. So, you can have a typeface. So that's what I said. Those are like, you can call it the design and engineering of or font production. So both, I think a typeface that does not do the production part at all or, is like badly positioned or something is just that has a it's a graver problem to me because that just means that you cannot render the script at all correctly. So that's not but that's not the design of it. The design is how the shapes look, the aesthetic value of it. So I was going with your question talking about how it looks more than how it works. Like if it doesn't work, to me that just is, it's a problem. Like there's...
Yeah, it's not even considered.
Yeah, you can't even like, ideally you shouldn't even use something that doesn't work well because that just, affects the legibility and that like comprehension of how I'm seeing. So, if you have a Jodakshar and if it's all broken, it affects the way you read it as well. So that's just something that's not even like you should... Like those if a typeface does not render and there's no way that you can use it in any way that you can make it look something that's beautiful, right? Like if it just doesn't render correctly. But I think how they look and how they're designed is something that's a different aspect. If you have... Like, for example, you spoke about Comic Sans, but I think the reason why Comic Sans was so hated is just because I think it got overused. That's just like if something gets too overdone, then people just get fed up of it. Correct, it's not just because it's like an ugly typeface or something. Maybe people have different... Again, like design is so personal and specific that some person might like even like the best, what I would think is a really good typeface, somebody else might think it's not. But again, it depends. These kind of conversations, I think, need to be more critical as to what is it that you don't like about it. And I think that's where you can go to a more sensitive level and try and understand what is it that you don't like about this typeface and what is it that I like about this typeface. And then we can have like a more informed discussion rather than just saying, oh, I think this is bad.
Yeah.
As designers especially.
Yes, correct. Beautiful. And are there any improvements or are there any trends which have been happening in Indic typefaces with respect to optimizing the space, the way we have Helvetica ka full family with condensed and condensed bold black. Have you seen anything? This is just on the fly.
There's so much that needs to be done that I think trends is something that's there's not as many people designing Indic typefaces to generate trends. You'll have trends if there's enough and more, and then you're like, okay, what's happening? I think right now the more necessary thing is to just cover the basics. So I think one you probably could call it a trend is multi-script families, is where people are trying to design typefaces that support
to different scripts,
to different scripts, and I think that's really great that that's happening, and you have that much variety available now.
Cool. Wow, this has at least made me curious to know more about it. So Kimya, I want to ask you last 2 questions. So what are your thoughts and long-term vision of spreading awareness about typefaces, and you in your independent capacity, and Mota Italic also, what are you guys doing to just promote this or bring awareness for that matter?
It's like awareness sounds like a big word.
Yeah.
But no, I think just mostly, I think
this
just
particular session also is sort of awareness, right? So it need not be bucketed into a very...
I kind of think about it more like starting a dialogue, about because I think if I say spreading awareness, that kind of puts me in a position where I'm like,
correct,
thinking like I know something more or something, which is not the case.
Initiating a dialogue is
it's basically so one thing that we started doing with like Mota Italic, that's me and Rob and a fellow designer, Tanya George, is we did these type meetups every month called Tupo Stammtisch, and that basically the idea for doing that was to bring the community together. So it was a monthly meetup for type interested people, and every month we would have something different happening, like we would have show and tell sessions, or just generally sit and talk. You just get together and talk about anything that interests you in this field. Or we've had drawing and sketching sessions, or we've had panel discussions and different kind of, or presentations or something, all revolving around the world of letter forms. And I think the idea to do that was to bring different kinds of people together in one space and just have them talk about things, because I think that's the most important. If you want to have an industry grow, then you need different
perspectives
and different people who are a part of this to interact with each other and to start that dialogue, even with students, because I've taught in different institutes. It was sometimes nice to have different students from different institutes get together and talk about, their particular courses or what happens in different schools. So, or for graphic designers to talk to type designers, or, those kind of things. Or sometimes there were just people who just heard about something but got interested and came, and I think that's fine too. I think it's just nice to have this kind of conversation with each other. So we met a lot of designers even from Bombay, type designers, and it was really fun to do that, because I think it's not in any like a preachy way or something. It's
correct.
Just
it's a platform to have thoughts.
So I think that is really necessary to and that I think two aspects I think is the education aspect of it, where you actually make sure that Indian script typography is kind of a part of all design syllabus, just as an introductory course at least. So I think that's something that wherever I've got an opportunity to go and be a part of any design curriculum is something that I've always suggested as just like at least a week or something. But I think because as graduate students, even when I was a student, you don't know what you want, it's just you're absorbing things, you're receptive to whatever is presented to you. And I think that's the age in which if you talk to younger designers, and these are the ones that are going to grow and contribute towards the design landscape of the country. like 10 years ahead. So you're thinking in the future, you're not just thinking of what is happening right now. So in that sense, like educating students right now becomes quite important, because they will be the future designers. And so if they are unaware of what is happening, and things are changing in India faster than we can comprehend. So I think it's important that they are at least aware of what can be done, for example. So also tying in this OpenType conversation that we were having earlier, is there's so many technical things that are possible now, that if you did not know what was possible, how will you create something that, so I think now if people know, oh, I can do this, or oh, I can do that, then they get more interested in, let me try something that's not been done before. Or so I think that's, so when I spoke about the swashes, in one of my previous typefaces, it's a handwritten typeface which has like alternates and swashes and everything, which is not such a new thing to do for type design as such, but because it's possible to do this kind of programming in software currently, I was able to do that. And it's there now, and it completely adapts to the script as well. And so I think that's just a way in which, so it's kind of through practice, through talking to people, and I think mostly what I'm trying to do aside from designing is just to go and talk to other people, because I think that's what I enjoy a lot as well.
Nice. And last question is actually just taking what you said just now further. I've been following your work for some time, and recently I found that you were fascinated with some 3D type drawing. So can you just tell us about that?
Well, it's that's also something that started as just an experiment. So it's a layered typeface that I'm working on, which is also possible because I'm working with this software called Glyphs, and you can, so it looks 3D, but it has like different layers, which has also been done in Latin again. It's not something radically new that I invented or something. I'm just taking the idea. And so it's kind of it's a display typeface, and it has 6 different layers, and so the appearance of it, when you see it, looks like it has these bevels, and it's like a 3D typeface. So it just started off as something that I was trying to do over the weekend, and it completely consumed me. And now because with Devanagari there's so many like the character set is larger, so it's 600 glyphs into 6 layers, and it's gone a bit insane. But I think it's just nice to try and do different things. Like that's what I enjoy. I think to use what's available and create something that's that's not been done either, or just to like try and push boundaries of what can be done.
Correct.
So that's my experiment. Which
all right, I think this is a good note to end this. Obviously, there's lots more to talk about, and lots more to be documented also in this field. So, but thank you for giving your time, and it was really nice talking to you. And on the closing note, how do people follow you? What, like any Instagram handle? And
so our Instagram handle for Mota Italic is just Mota Italic, and the website is the same, and we're on all social media as Mota Italic, and my personal work is at Kimya Gandhi.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kimya. Thank you for giving your time.
Thanks so much.
Okay. That's it.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Saavn, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.
With Con Edison, you have the power to manage your energy. From tracking your energy use online to accessing your account on the go, ConEd.com and the Con Edison mobile app give you the power to stay on top of your energy. Anytime, anywhere. Moving soon? Simply start, stop, or transfer your service with the click of a button. See how easy it is to manage your account at ConEd.com. Con Edison. Everything matters.